These panelists have come here today to share their experiences with you. And now I'm going to invite the panelists to come on stage and talk about their magic. Let's make some noise for the panelists!
Thank you, Arya. Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? I'm Paula de Cristofaro. I'm a paintings conservator at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And I'm thrilled that you're all here today. We're so pleased to be able to share what we do with an audience of students, of community, and for you to find out what a museum career entails and what opportunities there might be for you. I started at the San Francisco Museum in 1990 when the museum was in the War Memorial Building on Van Ness across from City Hall. So I call myself one of the legacy staff people there. There's just a bunch of us that have been there long enough to have gone through all three manifestations of the building. The War Memorial Studio, when we had a staff of just a few dozen people, we could all fit into one conference room. The Bota building, which was constructed south of Market and opened in 1995, our staff started to grow. And then with our closure in 2013 and our expansion, which opened in 2016, and now we have a staff of more than 400 people. So the museum has really, really changed a lot. But I regard myself as having an extremely privileged role in working on maintaining and preserving the collection. So what does a paintings conservator do? You might think, oh, the Sistine Chapel, the Mona Lisa, here's a work of art that maybe has someone's fallen into it, it's been vandalized, it's degrading over time. And I come from a background where I worked at institutions where I was primarily doing treatments of old mistresses and old master paintings. My background includes working at the National Gallery of Art, and I'll get into my training and professional trajectory during the course of this talk. But I start with this image of our contract paintings conservator, Alina Remba, working on a work from the University Art Museum, Berkeley by Hans Hofmann. And when I started at SFMOMA, we acted more as a regional center because we had a conservation studio. We could take in works from private collectors and other museums in the area that didn't have the resources to take care of their own collections. It's really changed now in that we don't act as a regional center so much. And in the course of my almost 30 years at the museum, the discipline of modern and contemporary conservation has really come to the forefront. Before modern and contemporary, I mean, the artworks are new. What's wrong with them? Well, the challenge of working with a modern and contemporary collection is that artists use a variety of materials. They're challenging the media. And so what are you going to do when something is incompatible, has an inherent vice problem? So I'll be telling you more about how we work with living artists, and that's really one of the joys of working at SFMOMA, because when I worked at collections at places like the National Gallery, I always wished that, I wish this painting could talk to me. Why is this problem happening? What happened 300 years ago with this Titian? Who intervened and what did they do? And we have the materials and techniques to analyze and try and answer that question, but with SFMOMA's modern and contemporary collection, we can go directly to the artists themselves. So here you see my colleague who's actually doing some damage repair on a Hofmann painting, but that's almost, the treatment aspect is just one small part of what I do. I'll show you a picture of our new conservation studios, which we redesigned and were part of the expansion building when we opened in 2016. We have studios that are on 2 floors, and you can see we have amazing window and natural light. The trunks are what we use to evacuate toxic solvents if we're working on something that is a health risk. People always ask about those elephant trunks. But you see in the center of the 3 images here, this is our artist materials tower. And when we redesigned our studio in the new building, we really wanted to incorporate the great collection we have of artist materials that we have amassed over time. So on this tower, we can store and display our artist materials. Here's a bit of the solid loopy-doopy materials that are in our main atrium. We have materials by Eva Hesse and her plastic and rubberware. This is a whole selection of Robert Rauschenberg mock-ups that we did of his glossy black painting, which is currently on view. And I don't know if, I hope all of you have been to SFMOMA. If you haven't been, I hope you can go soon and see some of the real materials, the glossy black painting by Rauschenberg. Oops. Is currently on display, and I've done a lot of work on that, and maybe during the Q&A I can tell you a bit more about it. So as a paintings conservator, I work with maintenance and gallery checking. We do a lot of dusting and just reviewing all the artworks before the door opens at 10 and people come in. I work with a huge team of the other departments in the museum. Installation, those are the people who put works up on the wall and move them around. Registration, they track everything, and with a collection as big as ours, objects are coming and going all the time. We have to know where they are and how to get them to a place that if they're going out on loan. I work with curators. You'll hear from one of our curators today. I work with the data people because we're always entering work into our database. Education, I'm here today to try and educate you about what I do. And then we also work with marketing and development for special tours and fundraising to get the word out. So as part of our maintenance, we go around every morning almost, or several times a week, and just make sure that all the exhibition works on display are in good condition. On the left is our beautiful Mark Rothko painting, number 14 from 1961, and it has finger marks on it because there was the worst case scenario of a runaway child getting past their parents and the guards and touching this really fragile artwork. So here we have one of our fellows looking at the area that was impacted by the finger marks very closely with a bright light. And then on the right-hand side is our team of Rothko conservators that worked on a different Rothko painting that had a big scratch on it. So the treatment process is quite exacting. There's a lot of documentation that we do before, during, and after treatment, just to make sure that for the record, everything we do is very, very well documented for the next generations of conservators who want to know, what did Paula do to that Rothko in 2019? Well, you've got the photos, you've got our written records. That's really important. On the left is half of the panel of our giant Osiris and Isis painting by Anselm Kiefer. You're looking at a painting that's lying on its longest side because it's too big to store and ship vertically. And again, this is just half the painting. Well, what's going on with this? This is one of the things that, if it's not broken, do you have to fix it? We do preventive conservation. And in this case, the work was going to be transported to Europe for a big Anselm Kiefer retrospective. I work with loans a lot. And with Kiefer, we normally would want to loan a painting that's this big, this fragile, and has already had some condition issues. Oops. Dyslexic, here we go. I don't know if you can see on the left, there's this sling, that's a piece of ceramic that fell off. And we wanted to honor Kiefer's desire to have this painting in his show, so we worked directly with him to ship it in its fragile condition and then work on it in Paris with his studio assistant. Whereas we used to be naysayers, no, it's too big, it's too fragile, it can't go. Now we really work to make these types of objects available, and shipping something as big and as fragile as this is quite a long story. So ask me about it later. How did this Kiefer get to Paris? And then on the right-hand side, you have Rodney McMillian installing In This Land in our New Works show. This is a painting that Mr. McMillian did in Los Angeles. He rolled it up on a tube, and then it had to be installed in the lower part in 3 sections around a curved wall. So we worked with Mr. McMillian to figure out how to get this painting, which isn't on a typical strainer, on the wall. And disciplines at SFMOMA include paintings, that's me, photography, objects, electronic media, and we all work together because things are often cross-disciplinary. So here you have Amanda Hunter Johnson working on our Robert Rauschenberg automobile tire print, and that's always a challenge for storage and display. It gets requested a lot for exhibitions, so we have to figure out how to get it on the wall. It used to be rolled up, now we just display it and install it in one long entire section. On the right is Martina Heidvogel working on the Namjoon Pike. Don't ask me about electronic media conservation because I don't know how to do it, but this is an emerging field. There are very few people who do it. And just thinking ahead of if you're technologically inclined and you like data, electronics, electronic media, there is now finally one of the conservation training programs that has electronic media as a discipline. Our objects conservator, Emily Hamilton, is hosing down the large Richard Serra sequence painting. This is at the Cantor Center, and it came to our museum for a couple of years. It's Corten steel, so it has to be moistened periodically, so the rust layer will continue to develop naturally. On the right is Roberta Piantavigna, our photo conservator. And then I'll talk a bit about training programs. There are 3 training programs in the United States. I went to the University of London Courtauld Institute, and I was glad to have the chance to live in London for 3 years, but the training programs are quite demanding in their prerequisites. So if you're interested in becoming a conservator, do ask me more questions, and I'll tell you what the route is. But basically, to be a conservator, you need focus, you need good hand-eye coordination. As an undergraduate, you need good technical experience in the fields of chemistry, art history, and studio art. And I studied the art history and the studio art, not so much the chemistry, but I did go back to school to get the chemistry requisites. And then most training programs require that you do pre-programmed experience in an institution or with a private conservator. So on the left is a woman that was a pre-programmed person trying to get experience just so that she knew that conservation was what she wanted to do. And then on the right is an advanced fellow in conservation. We have a 2-year program where someone who's out of a program has some experience and wants to really hone in on contemporary art conservation, comes and works with us in various disciplines that our department can offer, but oftentimes it's very cross-disciplinary. And the woman is sitting in an inflatable house designed by Alex Schriebler. And every time the inflatable house was blown up, it had air leaks, so they had to work with the artist to make the inflatable house stay inflated. We work so much with living artists, and in the past, we wouldn't really encourage artists to come and work on their pieces, but that has really changed. Here we have Mangechi Mutu. She's working on her ink and pigment painting on vellum, and the ink had poor adhesion problems. So she came in and actually addressed the damage instead of us doing it, and we learned a lot with these processes. Kamal Patton came in and worked on his graphite on unstretched paper. It fell off the wall because we didn't have an installation system to hang it safely. We tried magnets and they didn't work, so he came in and helped us treat the work where it had fallen on the floor, became crushed. And this is just a great opportunity for us to work with living artists, so we really try and do it as much as we can. We have technology, so although SFMOMA doesn't do a lot of high-end analysis, we work with other institutions that can do pigment or media analysis for us. And in this case, just a couple of weeks ago, before the fires, I was at the Getty Institute for a tear-mending canvas workshop. So here we are looking at apparatus on the left to hold a torn canvas painting in plane before repair. And then on the right is just all the stuff that was on the table, the microscopes, the gadgets, the equipment that were used for this workshop of 10 people to try reweaving canvas. That was really fun. Here's something closer to home, the great Diego Rivera Pan American Unity mural. We'll be bringing this to SFMOMA next fall. Ask me how. And then we had the great privilege of going to Mexico City and talking with the experts there who have moved and transported portable murals by Diego Rivera. This is Ruth Asawa's daughter, not Ruth Asawa herself, and Ruth Asawa's son, Paul. They came and shared their mother's materials, sketchbooks, techniques with us in the studio. And then Wayne Thiebaud came recently and organized his own show of works that he collected. He's in his late 90s and he ran us into the ground that day. It was a wonderful experience of trying to keep up with Wayne. Our current show, Soft Power, features a great strata of artists from all over the world. I really encourage you to see this cutting edge show. and during the install, which I didn't work on personally, but there was a lot of challenge with works that we didn't know what they were going to be, and the artists would show up. So Arya Simmons is installing her 157 panel work on the left. I didn't want to really bug her, so I just took this candid shot of her from behind because during the install it gets kind of tense. And then Ivan Oriviron had a really big canvas work that was restretched by our staff. He's in the background, they're working on his computer. The Julia Moretu giant installation in the atrium was a real head scratcher in terms of how to get these roll works on those giant walls. Ask me how he did it. And there's Julia Moretu putting on the finishing touches. And then here's our team. The conservation field up to date has been mostly women, pretty white, and I'm just hoping, and I know that the training programs and other opportunities for conservators are really growing in terms of Native Americans, people of color, really opening the door to this field and making it much more diverse with a group of people who, from their cultures, can work with their historic artifacts and legacy. I put my email up on the top so you can contact me if you have more questions later after the Q&A. And I have much more to say, but I hope that will come out during our discussion. Thank you so much.
No.
No? Okay. Now?
No, yes.
Better? Okay. I'm just getting over a cold, so I apologize if my voice is is cracking a little. My name is Shana Lopes, or you can say Dr. Shana Lopes. I earned it. I'm an assistant curator of photography at SFMOMA. I've been there for 8 months now, and I'm really excited to be at City College. City College holds a really special place in my heart because it's here that I actually took a history of photography course that would pretty much set me on the path that I'm on today. So thank you for having me. And here I am in my Halloween costume on the right. So I'm a cyanotype, in case you don't know what that is. It's the blue type of photograph that's behind me in that photo. And so today I just wanted to talk a little bit about my role at the museum. So most people, when they think of a curator, they think of just someone who organizes exhibitions. But that's only part of my job. Yes, I get to organize exhibitions, so I get to think about a topic, whether it may be a monographic topic, a thematic topic, and I think about what would create an interesting dialogue on the walls or off the walls too. But that's, as I said, only part of my job. I also manage the permanent collection at the permanent collection of photography at SFMOMA, which I think is running about 20,000 photographs. And that means that I think every day I get multiple questions sent to me about, can you tell me more about this photograph by the Beckers in your collection? Can you tell me if there's any writing on the back of this photograph? So lots of those kind of questions from researchers or students or just anybody who's interested. And digitizing the collection, there's lots that goes into managing a collection, and you're free to just ask me more about that if you're interested. I also deal with acquisitions, and so every quarter we have an acquisitions committee who helps us purchase works for the museum, for the photography department in the museum, and I help organize those meetings. I help with loans, and I also help with class and research visits. And I know some of you are here who are in a class, Erica Gentry's class. I'm so happy to see you in the audience. Let's see. So what skills did I need to have to get here? So I needed both theoretical and practical experience. I needed to learn about the history of art, and more specifically, the history of photography. And so I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate. For people who are interested in more contemporary art or becoming a curator of contemporary art, the doctorate isn't as necessary, just to put that out there, but you can ask me more about that. For the history of photography, since it's such a short field, about 170 years, most people, I'm a 19th centuryist, but I can do contemporary as well, so I consider myself a generalist. But you do need to know about the history of art and how the medium of photography isn't isolated. It connects to all the art that's happening around it, not just art, but design and cultural things that are happening. And so you need to be aware of that. That took many years. I think maybe 10 years of, 9 years for the doctorate, 2 years for the master's, and 4 years for the bachelor's. And then I had to get a lot of practical experience. I worked in photography studios, was a photographer's assistant. I'll get to that. So I know how a camera works. I wanted to be a photographer. My pictures weren't very good, but I was really interested in the reading about them. And so that's kind of how I ended up a little bit on my track. I was an intern at a gallery and I have museum experience. But you also need to know, or at least be willing to public speak or know how to public speak, but that's a skill that can be worked on. So it's not something you have to be good at right away. It was actually my worst quality when I first started, but I think I've become a little bit better. I think you need to be able to write, and that's also a skill that can be honed because writing, people edit you and you learn from that. So, I've become a better writer over the past 10, 15 years. And you need to be able to talk to people, talk to artists, talk to donors, and support them and support the artists and figure out kind of what their intention is. So it's about being able to have empathy with the artists. And so you need to be able to do that as well. My trajectory. So I am a San Francisco native. I grew up about 7 minutes from here, from City College, over by Tower Market, but it's now not Tower Market, I think it's Molly Stone's. So at the base of Twin Peaks. I even took a class at City College while I was in high school here. I think I took an Italian course in the marina at night. After graduating from high school. Oh, actually, let me just say, so I grew up in San Francisco. My mom was a single mom. I was also the first person in my family to go to college and firstborn in America. My father was born and raised in Brazil, and my mother was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany after the war. So just so you understand my background. I got a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania and went there for my bachelor's degree. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I ended up studying communications with a focus in fine art. It wasn't until my last year that I started taking photography courses and became really interested in the medium. I really liked the critiques and talking about photography, which probably should have signaled something for me, but it wasn't necessarily me making the work, but it was about talking about the work and seeing how the photographs made dialogues with each other on the walls. So after I earned my bachelor's degree, I moved back to San Francisco and I worked as a photographer's assistant in various food photography studios. So with view cameras and at night or on random days, I would take classes at City College. I think I took a large format class, a lighting class, and I took that history of photography class that I mentioned just at the beginning of my talk. It was so much, the content of that history of photography course sparked such great interest for me that no class at UPenn ever did. It was amazing. I was so invested in every lecture, in every reading, and from that point on, I realized that's probably what I should be doing. And so once I realized that I really liked history of photography, I thought that maybe I better take some history I should take some history of art courses and think about graduate school. So I worked at a food photography studio. I managed it so that at night I would take classes at SF State in the afternoons. I also got a 1 or 2 day internship at the Frankel Gallery, which maybe you guys are aware of, back in the day. for my application, and I wanted to see, if I actually liked working in galleries. But it wasn't maybe for me, but it was really helpful to like get to touch the works and be a part of that experience. I then ended up going to the University of Arizona. I applied to a lot of different programs, and I actually went to who funded me. And so I didn't want to get into debt by going into an expensive master's program. I got into NYU, I got into a lot of different places, but the University of Arizona paid my way. And so I went there, and it was amazing. They had a huge archive of photographs by Ansel Adams, Harry Callahan, Aaron Siskind, and it was a wonderful place to learn more about the history of photography. And while I was there, I had an internship also at the Center for Creative Photography, where I was able to work with the curators there and really gain a lot of hands-on experience about how to be a curator. I was even given the opportunity to do a permanent collection show my last semester there, and that was wonderful. And while in my last semester, I also applied for doctoral programs. So then I went on to Rutgers, where I would end up getting my PhD. During that time, I wanted to also have the practical experience of being in a museum. And so I asked for an informational interview in the photography department at the Met. And they said, they considered it. They said, okay, we're willing to give you an internship, but we want to give you an internship in something that that's not your area of expertise. And so for my master's, I focused on contemporary photography. For my internship, they had me catalog a large group of 19th century photographs, something that I knew nothing about it, but they were like, you need to be learning in an internship. That's the only way we're going to do this. So I did it 1 day a week for a year. And them allowing me into this family at the Met allowed me to get those are the kind of things that I cataloged. So figured out dates, artists, whatnot. It allowed me to get a research assistant position at the Met for the show Faking It, Manipulated Photography Before Photoshop. And so I then got a paid part-time position while I was working on my doctorate, which helped my CV, my resume. And it was a traveling exhibition. I got to work on a catalog. It was a really amazing experience. And so, but it took perseverance and luck really to get that. I happened to be there at the right place in the right time, and there was a position available for a year and a half. Then, because I was part of that, again, I was there, I got to be the co-curator for After Photoshop, a contemporary photography show that was the complementary or the epilogue, if you will, of Faking It. And so I got to suggest photographers for the Metropolitan to acquire for this show. And it was very empowering. I was also given 3 different Johnson rotation galleries during my time at the Met, because they also funded my dissertation, I should say. So after Faking It and after Photoshop, I applied for a fellowship, a dissertation fellowship at the Metropolitan, and they gave it to me. I had a renewal as well. So they funded pretty much the writing of my dissertation. And during that, I got to do these Johnson Gallery rotations where I had to tell the history of photography from their collection. And I think, it was, and showing different places, different processes. And it was a wonderful experience. And without that, I wouldn't have been able to get my position at SFMOMA. I needed that experience of being in charge of a small gallery space. Could I put up a rotation from the permanent collection? Could I handle the stress of a big traveling exhibition like Faking It with the catalog and multiple living artists in After Photoshop? Because it's hard to speak with 20 living artists and all of their desires of how they want it shown, and all of everything that comes with that. But yeah, I feel really lucky to have started here though at City College, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have during the panel. Thank you. Okay, hi everybody, how you doing?
Good.
I'm Sarah Murphy. I'm the Associate Director of Social Media and Content Marketing at SFMOMA, and it's just want to echo what my colleagues have said, that it's a huge honor for us to get to be here today. Really excited and appreciate your time and coming to listen and hear us talk about our careers at SFMOMA and how we got here. So, here's me. That's me again, in case you're not sure. I've been at SFMOMA now it's coming up on about a year. It'll be a year in a few weeks. That's my LinkedIn account. Please find me. Please connect with me if you have additional questions after this and want to talk about museums or about marketing and social media and content. I love talking about those things. My family will appreciate it. They won't have to hear about it as much. To the right is a photo that was taken of me during one of our recent member events at SFMOMA, which I didn't realize the photo was being taken, and I was taking a break from doing some social media and streaming the event to actually do screen printing, which ties in a little bit to my experience as somebody with a non-art background, getting to work in a museum and the continual joy and excitement that it brings to get to do things like screen printing at a party when I'm taking a break from the museum's Instagram account. So marketing and communications in general, but at SFMOMA, really, these are the serious definitions that I, would list in my LinkedIn profile, or if I was being very formal about what marketing and communications end up meaning. But for me, and particularly with museum, but basically anywhere else I've ever worked, it's a lot about connecting with people. It's hearing from them. It's trying to meet them where they are and share with enthusiasm and with sincerity and authenticity whoever you're representing, or in my case, whatever institution you're representing. I am so fortunate that you heard the work from both of my colleagues here. There are so many other people and positions like that around the museum, and if only there was more time for me to be able to tell their stories on the museum's social media accounts. I also manage the museum's email program, newsletters. So there's no shortage of artist stories, behind the scenes museum stories, community events, things that our education team works on that my team gets to help share out with the larger audience of the Bay Area and then anybody around the world who's interested in the museum. Day to day, so my job title, which is very long, is again, Associate Director of Social Media and Content Marketing. I might have one of the longer titles in the museum for somebody who's not a curator that has a donor's name in their title. But basically, it just means content. And content is anything from an upcoming exhibition to an artist interview to behind the scenes with our events team and figuring out the right way to distribute or publish that content so that it gets seen by the most number of people at the right time in a way that's relevant for them. The two channels that I work on are email and social media, and for social, the museum focuses primarily on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I think there have been some experiments in things like Snapchat, and I heard somebody asking about us having a TikTok account the other day, but my plate's already a little full. And then with email, I've broken it out into two categories of the general public and then people who are members. And one of the reasons that we separate that out is members end up having different perks or first access to different events, or in some ways don't need the same introduction to what the museum is that we constantly need to stay humble with and sharing out to the general public, not assuming that people know what SFMOMA stands for, how long the museum is, when it's open, how much it costs to come. So thinking about ways to continually share that message or those messages in a way that's not boring and ends up being useful is something that my team talks about a lot. So my days are way more meeting heavy than I've had in previous positions. I've worked in other jobs where I spend a lot of time doing writing or content production. And at the museum, because it's now, I think, almost 500 people, really my main focus is trying to connect with as many of my colleagues as possible in a timely manner so that I can learn in advance about their programs,
what their team's goals are, if they have an event coming up that they really want additional help promotion, with promoting, if an artist is going to be around and that artist is going to let us do a behind the scenes interview. So a lot of planning, a lot of calendaring. I use, as examples, Airtable and Asana. Those are two project management tools that are free that I self-taught myself on, that I use and have used in the past few jobs to manage the large number of content that ends up coming in. Goal setting is, really about thinking why we're communicating, what the larger strategic goal is. The museum recently went through an exercise of outlining a 5-year strategic plan. So in addition to my job being trying to get people to come to the museum and experience it, the museum needs to keep the lights on. And so revenue and selling tickets is something that I have to constantly think about with my team. But also, is the communication that I'm putting out relevant? Does it tie back to the museum's strategic plan? One of the core components of the museum's new strategic plan is, being brave and bold in our communication. So even though the museum has this incredible long history, us not just relying on assumptions that people know what we're about, or that that's still relevant today that it was, when I was a kid coming to the museum in the 80s. Creativity is nice in marketing as well. I want to make sure that, my team, there's a lot of personalities. I want them to be able to tell their stories about the museum in a way that matches the museum's voice, but also be able to showcase the personalities and creativity of my colleagues. There's folks throughout the museum, whether they're on the install team, on the accounting team, working, in custodial, they're all there and working at a nonprofit in San Francisco in 2019 because they care about art. There's generally a creative fuel or fire that's part of that, or some larger commitment to art and to art communities that I want to be able to showcase. And then measurement. So a lot of data, a lot of reporting, everything from the minutia of like how many times something gets retweeted. Is that, what we're looking at for this month? Do we need to have more engagement on our Instagram account? Setting those goals and sharing back with the rest of my team on how we're doing. Is our audience growing? Are people opening our emails? Are we getting sent straight to spam? I have to constantly look at those metrics. That ties back into reporting. So sharing not just with my boss, but with our partners across the institution, so they know, hey, we tried this one thing with an email about your program. Next month, let's try to do something on Twitter and with a Facebook event and try to increase attendance. So the skills that are needed, more so for my position right now at the museum, a lot of project management. And I never went through any formal training or project management courses. I still think about doing those on a pretty regular basis. I probably will. It's a skill set that you need to continually refresh as new tools become available, but the core components of being a strong project manager are huge parts of my job. Communication, I'm naturally really interested in listening to people and connecting with them and hearing their stories, being able to think about how I'm communicating. Am I listening enough? Am I actively listening? Am I soliciting stories from people around the museum or programs around the museum that aren't necessarily the loudest or the shiniest? How can I increase my skills there and try to draw those stories out? Data analysis, another area in which I'm mostly self-taught or just needed to learn how to report back, how to look at data. I thankfully took a statistics class here or there when I was in college, and that's laid the groundwork, but I continually try to stay up to date on best practices, on what sort of metrics and measurements are important for marketing. Tact is a really big one at the museum. There's 500 distinct personalities, a lot of living artists who I want to be incredibly respectful to and appreciative of their time. There's still never enough time or space in the museum's publishing schedule to share everything out on social media or email that we would want to be able to. So sometimes I have to have hard conversations with colleagues whose programs I personally love or who I respect very much, and to say no in a tactful way, but keep the relationship moving forward. And then a sense of humor is pretty crucial for me as an individual. I think it's not a requirement for anybody if that's not your communication style or speed, but it helps me get through longer days and more challenging lead up to exhibition openings. So a little bit more about content and what when I talk about success, likes are nice to look at. What does it mean for something to resonate with people? Is it resonating with our existing audience? Are we only talking to ourselves? How do we increase that? Those are questions that I think about a lot. But I really think that some of these keywords here are important components to have at least most of, if not all of, when we're thinking about, really, this is like the kind of planning that goes into Instagram posts of things being authentic, timely, transparent. We have everything from how visitors are engaging with artwork in the galleries to the bottom right-hand corner is JR, the artist, from an artist interview. And above that is a program that the education team did with the libraries that had a lot of events around San Francisco. So quickly on how I got here, I grew up in the East Bay. I went to Laney College, which is in Oakland, and it's part of the Peralta Community College District. I started going there in high school and taking photography classes, and then was a history student there before transferring after doing my 2 years of undergrad at Laney and transferring to UC Berkeley. And my background, as I mentioned earlier very briefly, is not in art. I was a history student who, after growing up in the Bay Area and being a Filipino-American, second generation, but one of the first people in my family to graduate from college, as I was looking through Berkeley's archives and trying to decide what I wanted to do my thesis on, I was looking through different labor movement pieces of archival material and started noticing a lot of people who looked like my uncles involved with some of the grape strike movements in the 60s, and ended up doing my thesis on the coalition building between Mexican and Filipino farm workers, and looking at ways that class and labor intersect. This is a very roundabout way of saying that after that, I could not decide and didn't have the money to go to graduate school for history or law school for labor, which I was thinking about, and ended up working in the private sector because I needed to get a job. So I worked at a startup called Keen, which makes some of the ugliest and most comfortable footwear you will ever see, if you haven't already seen them before. They were a startup at the time in customer service. I moved from that into doing public relations at an agency, went from there to a phone company, back to the public relations firm and did social media. And then about a year ago, SFMOMA was hiring for a position that had a weird amalgamation of almost all of the job skills I'd acquired in the last 14 years, and I took a long shot and applied. I'll kind of skip through this a little bit and just say, since I know we're coming up on time, these are some of the things that I've done in my career throughout the years, but how does somebody with a non-art background end up working at one of the most beautiful, largest, coolest museums in the country? It comes from being very fortunate to have had a family that invested in art exposure when I was growing up, and that took my younger brother and I to galleries, to museums, to local art openings, so that even though I don't have a background in art, when I showed up at the museum, my passion, enthusiasm, and strong enough understanding of art history was a good foot in the door, in addition to having done all the nitty-gritty marketing things that I've listed out here. That's everything from, that slide got a little messed up, but working on photo shoots, at previous jobs, to creating content that can be shared out on social media or in catalogs, working at trade shows, doing media events as someone in public relations, but getting to focus now on content and on showcasing art in a time when, as Arya was saying, culture is continually under attack, and being able to democratize access to art through social media is something that's really meaningful to me. Working at SFMOMA can be summed up for me in these two photos. It's a wild ride and it's a little bit of a blur, and I'm happy to talk more about that if you're interested. Thanks so much.
All right, let's give a hearty round of applause for our panelists. All right, thank you so much, panelists. Beautiful, just wonderful. I really appreciated the spectrum and the sincerity. That was really wonderful. A couple of things that I observed is from what their experiences, because a lot of times the facilitators have to kind of recap or do the too long didn't listen, type shenanigans, is perseverance, right? Perseverance, believing in yourself, right? A little bit of luck. Not taking no for an answer, right? And continuing to believe in the craft. And I think that's really powerful. And then also to see that the community colleges really played a really big role in all three of your careers. And again, I'm just, as the classified staff here, I'm just continuously impressed and humbled by the impact that this community college has had, not only in the Bay Area, but around the world. And I think sometimes community colleges get a bad rap for that. So don't forget, you're at a very amazing institute that other amazing institutions want to come and play with, right? Okay, so for those of you who kind of came in late, there are note cards on your seats. Did everybody have a note card? Did anybody not have a note card? Raise your hand if you did not get a note card. This is important. Okay, wonderful. What you're going to do now is, for those of you who are kind of late, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we're going to come back at 11:10. For those of you who wrote down questions on your note cards, please pass your note cards to the inside, right? So we're going to collect those questions, and then we're going to sift through them and look for themes and ask the questions from those cards. If you didn't get a chance to write questions because you came in late on those note cards, take some time now, write down your questions, 1 or 2, and then come find me. I'm wearing orange. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Well, I've kind of used my note card as a note. I mean,
You need another note card for a question? Yes, we can take care of you, no problem. So, a quick check for understanding. What are the note cards for? Wonderful. What do we do when the note cards have your questions on them?
Hand them to you.
In the middle of the hallway, if you haven't written your questions down yet, you come and find me and give them to me. That is correct. Okay? What time are we coming back from break?
15 minutes.
What time?
10 past 11.
10 past 11, 11:10. That is absolutely correct. All right. Bathrooms are outside. Get some snacks. Panelists, you chill out. All right. We're back at 11:10. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time to put away your phones and come back into the real life. That's right. Put down those phones. Come back into the real life. We're going to ask some questions of these wonderful wonderfuls. I know we came back a little late. That's my bad. I always try to run a tight ship, but y'all asked some really great questions, and I had some really hard time picking which ones that kind of represented a lot of them. So if your specific question does not get asked, you can come and beat me up in the parking lot later. It's my fault. Okay. But I did try my best to kind of bucket these wonderful questions that y'all asked. I really appreciated a lot of the critical thinking that went involved. And Shana, you gotta know, like, Shana and Paula, y'all had so many, like, when you were like, ask me how to do this, they literally asked. So get ready to answer those questions, okay? Because you talked a lot about artwork and how it moved, and so we're gonna ask those questions. Okay. So some of these questions are very broad and esoteric and philosophical, right? Because that's what we do as artists. And some are very specific, and some are pretty badass, I gotta say. So I'm really impressed with audience participation. So mad props to everybody out here. Okay, I'm just curious, the question here, and this was directed to one panelist, but I want to kind of open it up to everybody. How do you feel your career is important to adding social value to society? I told you. I'm playing here at City College.
Oh, I really like that question. And I think that with regard to conservation and working in a museum, art really matters. I love my career because I love art and I'm engaged with it. And I think that without art, where would we be? And it reaches all levels, all aspects of society. And I think as the museum, at least, really changes and enhances its programs to a more diverse community, I think that's a great step, and I think it will just improve. So without art, where would we be?
So I think for me, art is everything, and when I am thinking about an exhibition, my initial the thing that goes through my head is, so what's happening? How does this relate to what's happening today? How does this relate to contemporary experience? Whether I'm putting something from the 19th century on the wall, early 20th century, or 21st century, even, like, how does it relate to the issues of today? And I think that for me, art is a way to engage with topics that are pressing on our culture. It's a way to start a conversation. It's a way to get to the heart at how we're feeling, to maybe get the temperature, the climate of the day. And so as a curator, I feel like it's my job to try to find those threads running through art that are hitting on topics of whether it's gender, race, social equality, and because I want our viewers to be engaged in what's happening. And I think the only way to really have that engagement is to look at what's happening in our world.
And that's something I actually have, I think about a lot, because I think social media can be pretty poisonous and pretty awful. And as somebody who works in it for a living, I'm constantly considering both those platforms as well as societal interaction with phones as opposed to people. So that's a question I ask myself pretty regularly. One of the ways in which I hope it provides value or resonates with people is in thinking about access points to art, and thinking about the ways in which I was able to access art as somebody who grew up in a working class family in the East Bay with parents who were very passionate about art, but who were not able to, we didn't have a family membership to museums, so we took advantage of going when we could, a lot of free and public art, a lot of festivals that in that time in Oakland were very prevalent. So I hope that through some of the more widely available access to some things in the museum's collection through its social media accounts, we're able to provide access to art more broadly. And then something else I think about a lot is being able to tell stories of artists who are not necessarily typically represented either on the walls of the museum or in sort of traditional historical teachings of what Western art is considered valuable, and being able to test myself and be very humble about seeking out those stories and asking for other perspectives and using my position as an opportunity to uplift and broaden the reach.
Wonderful, thank you, panelists. So panelists, I want you for the next question, if you may humor me, close your eyes and imagine your 18-year-old self. Okay, what is this person like? What are their fears and anxieties about getting a job? Because that's real. Now, I want you to think about if you could go back in time and give this person one piece of advice. What would that piece of advice be?
I was telling someone during the break that between my undergraduate education and getting into a graduate program in conservation, I worked at a really horrible job for a year. And that was a great experience because it sure taught me what I didn't want to do and to be very adamant about getting together what I needed to do to get into a program. So take that crappy job and run with it. We'll run out of it.
So there are two things I would tell myself. One, it would be just apply already. So you can't get into a program or get a scholarship or get funding or get the job if you don't actually apply. And I think there were probably 2 or 3 years where I was just taking classes at SF State and City College. I was taking all these classes, but I probably had enough credits by that time to have applied to graduate school. But I was so careful. I thought that this would be my one and only shot. But I think in retrospect, what was I waiting for? I was so worried to fail that I feel like it could have happened even sooner. And secondly, I was, at one point, I had wanted to take a photography class in high school, and I was, again, scared that I wasn't going to be good at it, and so I didn't take it in high school, but I had always been so curious about photography, and it wasn't until my senior year of college that I finally got up the courage to take this photography class, and it was like mind-blowing. So maybe if you're scared to take a class, it's probably a sign that you should take it. Take it then. Okay.
I was pretty angry when I was 18. I'll start with that. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it felt like there were very rigid ways to get the places that I thought I wanted to go. Sort of along the lines of what you were saying of applying, I think I would have told myself, like, imposter syndrome is very real, but it does not need to determine the choices that I make. Like, that voice still lives in me when I'm in the museum, and I'm marveling at how, I get to walk like behind the galleries and come out through the side doors. But there are artist names that get said pretty regularly that I don't know who that person is, and that's okay. And like, those feelings don't need to determine the decisions that I make or the risks that I take.
Awesome, thank you, panelists. So if I may do the recap, every experience prepares you for the next experience. Take positive risks. Everything you want lays on the other side of your fears. And it's okay to not know every single artist that everybody's talking about. And your feelings don't make it real. Just because you feel a certain way does not make it a reality. Is that pretty accurate? Yeah, okay, very important. Okay, panelists, I know you briefly touched upon this during your spiels. Can you please just review, because there were tons of questions regarding this. What specific feedback or advice would you give around the role of education, specific technical trainings, so thinking about AAs, bachelor's, master's degrees, let me go pay Stanford however many thousands of dollars to do this training, how valuable and effective in reflecting in your own experiences was that in finding your career, in getting to your career, and then also in current day? And you all don't have to go in the same order. Please, whoever wants to take it.
So I'd actually like to answer this. If you're thinking about working in a museum, you're not going to be paid a ton of money. So, and I knew that, I had been aware of that before going in to graduate school. And so I was very mindful about who gave me money for graduate school and who didn't. I did not want to go to a $40,000 a year program and get $160,000. I was very mindful. So please, think about that. The education part is the most important, getting the degree, not necessarily where it's from. And the other thing about programs and education, it's also the connection you make with the professor. It's not just the classes that you take, but the go to the office hours and get to know somebody, because you're also going to need letters of reference. Those are really important, not just the box that says you got a B+ or an A- or an A. It's, can a professor actually write about you in a way that's real for those applications?
And I wanted to mention that it's a long road to hoe to get into a conservation career via the typical means of the post or the graduate training programs. But you can get creative about working maybe with a private conservation studio, getting pre-programmed experience. You can, some people are self-trained and then they get experience along the way, eventually by either working in an institution or setting up their own private business. There's a group called the American Institute of Conservation that has a whole lot of information on conservation careers, and I think you just have to be persistent and know that this is what you want to do and love art, and then just keep trying. And then financially, I don't know really what to say about that because my education, the formal part, was so long ago, but I think there are options to work with granting agencies and work study in all situations, and I hope that's still the case.
graduate school was something that I really wanted to do, but that I was pretty sure was not going to result. I was very interested in studying history, and I was not interested in becoming a tenured history professor or trying to go along that path. I still think sometimes about going back to graduate school. It calls to me, but because I went to Laney and then transferred to UC Berkeley and applied and got a scholarship through my dad's union. My dad was a sheet metal worker. I was able to graduate college with very little debt. And that meant that's something that I don't know is as applicable today. And I want to say that with a lot of reverence and respect. But it informed me deciding to not pursue further schooling, even though I love spending time in the library and archives at UC Berkeley. I would still like to go do that. I might still someday. I do think that I didn't get a chance to talk about the industry I was in before I worked in museums, but it was the outdoor industry, sort of like outdoor companies and camping companies and a lot of environmental nonprofits. Schooling is important. What I look for when I'm looking at resumes is somehow someone's interest coming through. It doesn't have to be in a school program. It could be in volunteering, which I know is additional, like unpaid labor that requires time. I think graduate school for marketing and for communications, people do that route. I don't think it's as applicable. Work experience matters. And I know that getting your foot in the door to get that work experience for me was a lot of times half the battle, and it took taking a lot of entry-level customer service positions that I didn't really want to do or that I was very nervous about doing that eventually led to the positions that I'm in now.
Wonderful, thank you, panelists. So too long didn't listen. I heard correctly, and please correct me if I didn't, is you need to be very tactful about if you decide to pursue education, doing it in a way that's going to serve you and not going to drown you in debt. There are other ways to acquire experience and demonstrate your passion for this. And remember, saying that you're passionate about something doesn't make you passionate about it, right? It's like nerding out, right? Putting energy into the people who want to build with you, right? So, Dr. Lopes, Doctor, okay, just making sure. Gotta respect the doctors. They work hard. Investing in the people who want to build with you, right? So your instructors are going to write letters of rec for you. So be nice to them, engage with them, learn about them, right? They're here to help you build. And I know if anything about team art, they're definitely into that. And then also be creative about how you present yourself in application materials, right? So you may not have exactly the degree from UC Berkeley, right? Or, NYU, but maybe you started your own little personal gallery in your garage and you bring the community in. That stuff's really cool and really interesting. And if there's anything I know about us creatives, we like really cool and really interesting, right? And then, of course, I want to definitely honor what Sarah was saying about the thirst for knowledge and curiosity that we have as creatives is always going to be embedded in what we do. And remember that that's always going to be available to you, and you don't have to pay $1 billion to quench that thirst. Have I missed anything? Okay, and also there's grants and funding that can help you do things as well. Okay. I would love to, panelists, if you could please share with the audience, studio audience, let's go with two things you want to see in a internship or job application in your world, if you get a chance to look at that and make a hiring decision. So 2 things you want to see in a resume or cover letter when you're looking at making hiring decisions in your world.
I'm happy to go first with that. I'm fortunate enough at the museum to be able to volunteer to be on hiring panels for other departments and other teams. There's a lot of consensus-driven decision-making at the museum, so I get to weigh in on the web team's hiring and the design team's hiring. Something that I wish I had known earlier on when I was applying for jobs and that I know now after having been involved a lot more in hiring is please ensure that on your resume, and I tell myself this if I ever apply anywhere else, please ensure that the keywords in the job description are in your resume and in your cover letter. And unfortunately, that is something that I think in people's excitement to be first or apply right away or write something really long that demonstrates a lot of enthusiasm, there can be a lapse.
Does everybody know what a keyword is when Sarah says that?
And I can give an example.
Please do.
So an example would be, I very recently hired a fantastic Bay Area born and raised email marketing manager. His entire job is managing our email marketing. I think I went through about 100 resumes and maybe only 20 of them used the word email in the resume or in the cover letter. And this is not me shaming or slighting that. I think that those folks were qualified in lots of other ways, but I had to find someone who knew about email and who could talk about email in either or both their resume or cover letter. I went through all of them.
Without email.
She reviews all of them. There is no applicant tracking system at SFMOMA. That's a big hit for y'all. Thank you.
So we recently hired a curatorial assistant in our department, and I was on the panel. One of the most important things for me, at least in the curatorial realm, is I look for a cover letter that doesn't have grammatical mistakes, or that there's no misspellings, or that someone has actually taken time to craft a well-worded, articulate letter. And I should just be very honest, when I write a cover letter, I have 2 people look at it, okay? Like, this is not something I do by myself. I think it's really important to know that everyone has an editor. So get someone else to read your letter and make sure that it makes sense, and that, there's nothing that sounds clunky or baggy, I like 16 sentences, things like that. And the second thing I look for is not a 3-page long cover letter. If you're applying for an academic position, that's a very different story. But for a museum, a page and a half, at least for curatorial, is sufficient. The CV, the resume can be long, but the cover letter doesn't need to be pages and pages long.
With our hiring of our advanced fellow, we always look for people who are intellectually curious, and I'm always very keen to find out if they know the collection at all. Have they done their homework? You want to work at SFMOMA? What's your favorite painting or your artist? Or who do you really like or don't like? Do some homework for the institution or the entity that you're applying for so that they know that you took the time to really engage with what that potential employer is offering.
I love it. Thank you so much, panelists. So the too long didn't listen. Keywords. You're applying for a job that has email marketing manager in it? What words should be on your resume and cover letter? Email, marketing, and manager, amongst others that are in the job description. That's super important. When you are putting together your assets, proofread, no grammar, no spelling mistakes. And yes, I will be real, writing resumes and cover letters is soul crushing. And that's the system that we're working with right now. So take the time, proofread it yourself, not immediately after you wrote it, because your brain is dead at that point. Then proofread it later, share it with someone else to proofread it. You want to send it to me, I'm an employment person, I will proofread it, right? And then you will cry because I will tear it apart. And then share it to another person to proofread it, and then apply. And then lastly, and I love this because y'all are just confirming everything I tell the students, is do your homework, right? You want to work in a place? Why do you love this place? Talk about the MoMA. Talk about the Institute. Talk about that time you went in there and you had your mind blown by those floating bowls in that one room and it was so peaceful that you almost felt like you saw liberation, right? I don't even remember what that was called, but I really enjoyed that. It's like you have to nerd out in your assets a little bit. Was that everything, Pam? Thank you. So, in my world, as a career person, I've observed that hiring is arbitrary and sometimes discriminatory, right? And it's real. And some of the members of the studio audience are looking at their second careers, and they want to kind of get a sense of, for those who might be on the later end of their career life or on their second career, are there opportunities for, you know, people who are maybe in the 50, 60 plus crowd? Can we please speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say that that's something that I was delighted to see with our last summer internship group, that there was a variety, that diversity wasn't just represented through ethnicity, that there were students who were interns at a variety of age levels. And I thought that that was important to me, that the museum did not equate internship with age 22. And I would definitely say, you know, I've met folks at a variety of points in their careers who are starting for the first time at SFMOMA, whether it's frontline staff working at the ticket area, to interns, as I mentioned, to folks who apply to work on our fundraising and events team. I'm not going to pretend that ageism isn't real or legal, but or something that everybody will have to consider if they're not already considering, but I have been impressed to see that that is something the museum appears to be actively trying to address.
As a legacy staff member, I get really excited when I see someone new who's maybe over 30. And since I've been in the same position for so many years, I don't know quite how to address how, say in conservation, whether we would be able to accommodate somebody who was looking for a second career in conservation who was perhaps more mature, but there are always opportunities, and we don't really have an active volunteer program at this point, but it's something that we used to have, and it would be certainly something we could consider bringing back. And certainly with the other museum programs like the summer interns and the frontline staff and such, I think there are more and more possibilities for non-entering people, but people who are considering a second or third career later on in their professional lives.
For me, if someone can write and talk about photography, I don't care how old they are.
Wonderful. So, kind of like the too long didn't listen is at SFMOMA, if you can communicate why you are a fit and you have something interesting and exciting to say, it doesn't matter if you're 1 or 100. They'll want to talk to you. I mean, if you're a 1-year-old and you're blind, that's impressive nonetheless. But I'm really pleased to hear that, y'all. I'm really pleased to hear that. Okay, the next question, I'm just going to read it straight from this card. As the MoMA is being asked to disclose its funding and investments from private prisons, how can SFMOMA be a leader in working with communities to be more transparent about the sources of funding and investment? Sarah Murphy.
Yeah, so as the resident person on the communications staff, marketing and communications staff, I'm happy to try to address this very important, very timely question about funding and about donor affiliations. And I have to warn you, my answer is going to be a little bit of a non-answer because that's not an area that I work actively in, but I can say that it is something that our fundraising and donor management team is taking very seriously. That people are interested in increased transparency and understanding of donor affiliation and how the museum solicits money and from whom. So aside from saying that I know that people are talking about it and taking it seriously and taking concerns about that seriously, that's about the limit of my knowledge on that. But it is a conversation that is not just in the news, that is happening internally as well.
Wonderful. So it sounds like SFMOMA is pretty woke, y'all. They're doing their best. I mean, I think this stuff is really challenging and complex, and it can be triggering for a lot of people. And as humans, sometimes it's really hard to just have like a decent dialogue about how do we undo this thing that has been going for so long, right? You know, and money is a thing, and you know, it's really challenging. So I really appreciate you just taking that question on, you know. kind of like a semi-lighter follow-up to that question. And if the person in the room who asked this question is here, I just want to get some unpacking from some of this language. The question reads, what is the SFMOMA actively doing to democratize its mission and provide more accessibility? Is the person here who wrote this question?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to a question. Oh my God, you tricked me. Yeah. I just want to can you just unpack the terms democratize and what do you mean by accessibility? So clarity for the panelists, please.
Well, should I stand?
No, you can stand right there.
I'm quite happy with standing, I'm not shy. It really, in terms, I'm taking a course in Intro to Museum Studies here at City College, and we're looking at, democratizing in terms of accessibility for, peoples in marginalized communities, for example. The museum is not free, so, accessibility in terms of opening up to marginalized communities, trying actively engaging with communities. Do you go into those communities? And also, how about actively, bringing those communities into the museum to work in the museum? What opportunities are there for marginalized people in marginalized communities? And I'm referring particularly because, in San Francisco alone, there are so many people who do not. I go to the MoMA and I don't see the community where I live represented necessarily at the museum, except for maybe the security guards. So, that's what I'm referring to.
Thank you so much. So if I'm hearing you correctly, and this is something that's probably very broad for a lot of different organizations and institutions across the Bay Area, tell us about some of the things that SFMOMA is doing to do outreach and bring people from, people who don't have access to the MoMA to the MoMA.
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's something that I'm fortunate enough in my job to be able to do a lot of working with other teams who are focused on that and who have different outreach perspectives. So we have everything from our education team, who does a lot of programming with either local elementary, middle, high school education to secondary education, not just focusing on private art universities, but being in places like City College, having relationships with schools in different parts of the Bay Area and trying to build coalitions there. Specifically as it relates to pricing and thinking about access in that way, one of the things that I've been really happy to see at the museum is there are not conversations about marginalized groups as a singular block. There's a lot of discussions about different barriers to access, whether it's transportation, whether it's pricing, whether it's people's work schedules, and that not aligning with the museum's open hours. I know that that's something that in the strategic plan for the museum, which I unfortunately can't quote directly verbatim, but is on the website, there is a strong component in that about increasing the number of free days that the museum offers. Through pretty generous funding, the museum is free to anybody 18 and under. So something I get to do in my job is promote that and really make sure that I didn't know that and I live here. So making sure that that message gets out. And I think listening is a big part of that. In addition to data that the museum can take a look at as far as who's coming to the museum, what different categories they represent, whether it's socioeconomic, gender, ethnicity, thinking about whether or not the collection is relevant to populations that the museum wants to try to attract more of or serve in better ways. Those conversations are happening. So I think that there is no singular answer, unfortunately, to a very important question about that, but I can say that each individual team or department within the museum has either already been tasked or is continuing their work along those lines in democratizing access and making the museum feel more welcoming, be more welcoming, continue to be relevant to people that it has been relevant for, become more relevant to people that have not been interested in the past, and that it's also
listening, you know. It's good for me to hear that, to be able to take that back and share that that's something that people are, it's not just us in our meeting rooms having conversations about that, but it is something that people care about and are willing to bring up at panels.
But the reality is the lowest membership is still $120 a year. I think there used to be, I know there used to be an artist membership, there used to be a student membership. Why were those on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. That's something that, so during the last free day that the museum had, staff were encouraged, if we were able or interested in doing so, to volunteer to be ambassadors in the galleries. And one of the things that was the most rewarding for me about being able to do that was to hear feedback directly from folks who were seniors, students, and artists about previous membership levels that no longer exist. So the more that we hear feedback like that and are able to share it with folks, it matters. You know, it matters when I'm able to have one-on-one conversations or when that's able to be voiced here. I'm unfortunately not the person that's in charge of pricing, but I think that being able to share out needs and requests around that, it's pretty important for, you know, me to be able to do that, so thank you for sharing it. I don't know the answer as to why those were taken away. I would imagine that there was an economic decision behind it that I'm not privy to.
Yeah, a few more comments. We used to have Free Tuesday every month up until 2013 when the building closed for the expansion. And I think Free Tuesday didn't come back immediately because, again, maybe of the economics, and they really wanted to bolster the membership. Free Tuesday was great. It was regular, first Tuesday of every month. It was a little bit of a concern because we got so many visitors that there were times when there were traffic jams in front of the artwork. The guard and security staff were pressed, but I think it's a good idea. And I know they're having several community days now that are free per year. There's the half price on Thursday nights. But I do want to mention that we're developing, changing the subject a little bit, we're developing a tactile tour for people of no or low vision. And this is a pilot. We're going to roll it out in a couple of weeks, where we'll bring our artist materials into the galleries, and we'll stand in front of, it's going to be the Rauschenberg glossy black painting, which we've done a lot of research on. We did a lot of mock-ups, and we'll have all these mock-ups. We've been working with Lighthouse for the blind and blind ambassadors, and we're going to see how we can make the gallery collections more accessible to people with low or no vision, and we're really excited to see how this will develop.
I also used to have a student membership, and I agree. But I did also want to say, for those of you who are taking art classes or art history classes, please, if your professor hasn't maybe mentioned or talked about coming for a visit to SFMOMA, if photography or prints or drawings or painting, you guys are learning about that, you can come and do a class visit. It's free. We just have to figure out a time that works. Unfortunately, we can't really do evening classes, but it's really amazing. And you get to come into the museum, and I think you get to go into the museum after too. Yeah, but contact Jameson, he's the person. But I know that Erica Gentry's class came, and other, like CCA has their kids come. There's lots of different local colleges that come to the study room, and I'd love to have you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists. So as you can see, City College students don't play. Be very serious about this stuff. And also, I really want to acknowledge that what we're doing is unfolding a great deal of experiences that we've had leading up to this moment, right? And so whenever you have running any kind of program or an institution, it takes a while to figure out, like, okay, we have this idea, this is the vision, and that's wonderful, but how do we implement it, right? Just as, you were talking about Free Tuesdays caused traffic jams in front of the, some of the paintings, and that was overwhelming for the guards. So it takes a minute. And, one day when y'all are bosses and y'all are implementing programs and events and exhibits of your own, you're gonna feel this same experience too. So I just wanna remember to share compassion, right? And I know personally, as a member of staff here at City College, I'm blessed enough to have a faculty pass, right? So we can hear that the strategies are coming and they're trickling out. And I'm just really pleased that y'all are that's even top of mind. That's wonderful. Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions. My next question is kind of an interesting one. how do you get your own artwork accepted and displayed into museums? Not just the MoMA, but museums in general.
Everyone goes about it in a very different way. I guess for starting artists, for people who are trying to get their work out there, my main suggestion would be I would probably not spend money on those portfolio review things that people do, where you pay like hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Those are not like I would really like I would want you to try to get into a group show, a local group show. All the curators, we go to all the shows if we can. We try our best in the area, and so we take note if we see someone in a group show. It's not just monographic shows that we're interested in. I think that's where you find some of the best people. We also talk to faculty at art schools or whatever. If someone tells me, hey, I have this really interesting student, maybe you should look at them. I'll do an artist studio visit. There's different ways. I wouldn't spend a lot of money. With making like a book for yourself or even postcards. I would maybe get a website, a rudimentary website. People don't drop off portfolios anymore at the museum. Maybe send a single page letter to the head curator. You never know what's going to happen. But really, get yourself in a group show if you can. And I think that's the best way to do it.
SFMOMA does have several programs for emerging artists. One is called SICA, Society for the Encouragement of Contemporary Art. And as I speak, we are installing the latest SICA show that they run in every 2 years. So that should open, I think, this week. And those are artists who are not really mainstream, but they're local Bay Area artists. And there's a committee for SICA that goes around to all the artist studio about 6 to 10 months before SICA is installed. They select the artists that they want to present. There's also a new work show that is constantly rotating. And a recent new work show featured the works by a Lebanese artist who's about 90 years old, Etel Adnan. She's not a household name, but this was, again, thinking of ageism. We gave her a show, and that was really successful and thrilling for all of us on the staff to show an artist who was in her 90s and not well known like Queen Tebow.
That's wonderful. So the final question, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, is from my perspective, beauty is subjective, and thus art is a manifestation of beauty. And there are gatekeepers to decide who gets shown what, where, right? What piece of advice would you give to the artists in the room about how to manage the tension between, oh damn, I want to create something that feels good to me and represents me, and also it'd be cool to get it up on a wall. Does that question make sense? Because I know I kind of asked something that's really, it's a really big question. And as just museum practitioners and artists yourselves, I would just love to hear your insight and experience on it. You can ask clarifying questions about my question.
I guess I would just say that any history of art is completely subjective, and there's so many different ways to tell the history of art, the history of photography. I tell a history of photography through SFMOMA's collection, but each curator would tell a different story. And so, Claire, can you do it again?
Yeah, just one piece of advice you'd give for aspiring content creators, who are just like, man, my stuff's subjective. It's hard to feel like I have an audience or anyone cares about my work,
Okay.
Just something like that.
So I've actually been reading a bunch of, I'm a juror on something, not on one of those portfolio reviews, and I've been reading a lot of artist applications, and you can tell when an artist is really interested in a topic rather than they're throwing out all these jargon-esque words that I'm not sure they actually know what they're talking about. I'm not sure that that's what their interests are, and it's being blinded by this language that's covering it up. And I feel like every artist needs to kind of come up with a little bit of a bullet point, or elevator spiel. What are you really interested in? What's driving you? Give 2 sentences, 3 sentences. If you can distill it in 3 clear, not very long sentences. That's what you need, and that's what curators are also looking for. Like, what are the issues that you're tackling? When I read an artist statement that's super duper long and it keeps going and going, and I feel like, and it's all over the place. I just want to be in a room with them and say, like, just tell me like I'm nobody. Tell me like I'm nobody. Tell me, like, just give me a sentence. And so try to figure out what your main interest is in the art. Why are you producing it? Is it because you're interested in like gender issues? Is it because you were born in a family, it's been displaced? Like, what's really driving it? And that for me is important.
It's perfect, thank you. And maybe I'll counter that a bit with, well, what if your dream comes true and your artwork does come into the collection of SFMOMA? What if it's in our collection now and we don't show it? So a little anecdote, just last week, local artist named Mary Lovelace O'Neill came to the museum. She's maybe in her 70s. She has an established art career. A work of hers from, I think it was 1972, was gifted to SFMOMA, and we had never shown it. Beautiful work on unstretched canvas. She put brown powdered charcoal on it and vivid stripes of pastel. We'd never shown this work. So she came to the museum on Halloween with her entourage. They were all dressed up in costumes, and she came to the temporary gallery, and she wanted 15 minutes alone with her painting before the curators and me and whomever else came to discuss the work with her, because we were going to show it starting last Monday we installed it. And so this is a real poignant moment of what we have in our collections by artists whom we haven't shown ever, if it's a gift or just it wasn't in the program. So that's just another aspect of how we are now mining our collections much more to show the artists who did make it to our collections but are underrepresented or never shown at all. Be careful what you wish for.
The one thing I would add to that from more of a non-art background, but just in thinking about things that are challenging for me to do and perspectives that I want to share or things that I wish I could communicate through my work, is build community, whatever that ends up meaning, whether it's fellow artists, whether it's just a group of fans who really appreciate your work, who can be your sounding board, who can be your support system. I have to continually take that advice and remember to ask for help and remember to continue to focus and invest in building community and being community for other people.
I love it. Thank you so much for tackling that really broad question. So, too long didn't listen? Now I can remember. Distill your inspiration. Distill it down. What is driving you, right? I think we all get caught up in these application processes and the artist statements, and we think we need to fill out a whole page, and it's like, no, 3 sentences. Less is more, right? Then it was, be careful what you wish for, because, sometimes when you have a there, from here, you get there, and then that becomes here, and then a new there appears, right? Everyone understand what I mean when I say that? Okay. And then lastly, your tribe. Your tribe and your community is the most important group of people. They're the ones that are going to lift you up, you're going to lift them up, and then at the end of the day, we lift each other up. And I personally think that's kind of what art's all about, is lifting us up. All right, that's enough of me talking. Let's make a big round of applause for our panelists. That's right. We should all stand up. All stand up. Applause.